So, people, I'm here with American comedian Kurt Metzger. A lot of people, and we're concerned about this. We're going to put on a concerned face. A lot of people are overreacting to the COVID threat among children. That's how we feel about it. And it's been much more damage done to children from not having in person learning, the effects that we're not going to know for a long time. But certainly deleterious effects on kids that are much worse than the threat the virus poses children. People say, yeah, but then the kids get it and they bring it home to their grandparents. Tell your grandparents to get vaccinated. Don't you trust the science? Does the vaccine protect people or not? If it does, then have your grandparents get fucking vaccinated. Okay, there you go. So what are they doing now? Well, the CDC is suggesting that everybody in the whole country cancel football and band. So no band and no football. But you can have college football and professional football, and you can have stadiums every night filled across this country. Someone watching a basketball game or watching a football game or a hockey game, and nobody's going to stop that. But you can't have high school football. And you can't have high school band. According to CDC.
Well,
that's
do
what
they
they're
make
saying.
money?
What's that? What?
Or do they make money? I mean, it's like,
So, let's see. This is by Elizabeth Cohen. She's a senior medical correspondent. So the headline of this is CDC's suggestion to cancel football and band in nearly every U.S. school called unrealistic. Well,
which schools don't have to have it canceled? Are they like seed team farms?
yeah, right? They're those would be the children of the celebrities.
Yeah, right.
They could say, just like that, but they're the people. The equipment manager would have to wear a mask.
Yeah, right.
But not anyway. So here we go. If the scientists at the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention had their way, that's a funny way to put it. If the CDC had their way, hey, did CNN have a falling out with the CDC? Because I don't like their tone. Right? Doesn't that seem like they had a falling out with the CDC?
Mm-hmm.
I thought they used to be butt buddies. What's going on now?
The CDC had their way with them before. And
Yeah,
now
God.
they're being accused.
I think the CDC forgot to call the next morning. Because that's what this seems like, right? Oh boy. I've gotten that wrath when I was a young man. Okay, back to the thing. If the scientists at the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention had their way to curb the spread of COVID-19 right now, nearly every U.S. school would cancel football, wrestling, band, and loads of other mainstay school activities. Now, you know I used to wrestle, not in high school, not very long usually, just until I came. But anyway... So, isn't that, so there you go. So let's go. In another piece of guidance, the CDC tells people who've recovered from COVID-19 that they can leave their homes after 5 days. And while they're out and about for the next 5 days, they should avoid being around more than 80% of the U.S. public. Because they have to stay away from people with comorbidities and people who are immunocompromised. And I think the elderly and so that comes up to like 80% of the public.
Well, didn't the CDC say that because of Delta Airlines, I mean?
Dr. William Schaffner, an advisor to the CDC for 4 decades, he said it's unlikely, unreasonable, and unrealistic to think Americans will follow either of those agencies' suggestions. Making public health recommendations, they are not a platonic ideal, Schaffner added. They have to work in the real idea. Dr. Schaffner then went on to knock the CDC's books out of their hands and stuff them in a locker. So, here we go. Such out-of-touch advice has been a hallmark of many CDC recommendations long before the pandemic began, and the agency needs to do better, said current and former health officials and physicians who worked with the CDC on health guidance. Holy shit. Now CNN is giving the CDC a wedgie. Everybody's piling on the geeks at the CDC. The whole school hates them. The whole school hates them. Part of the problem, Schaffner and others say, is that the CDC scientists are sometimes stuck in a bubble. No kidding. Well, you got nerds. Literally, this is another doctor talking.
Oh, wow.
He goes, you got nerds, literally science nerds, who are writing these things, said Dr. Otis Brawley, who worked with the CDC on cancer guidance while he was chief medical officer at the American Cancer Society from 2007 to 2018. Wow. I'm imagining Dr. Otis Bradley as Ogre from The Revenge of the Nerds. I hate nerds! Wow.
Don't you imagine he looks like he's got a real Brett Baer head and build?
He then went on to say, I'm going to beat the shit out of the Glee Club. He went on to say that. Brawley added, though, that the CDC is often in a tough spot. For example, it's clear there have been documented COVID-19 outbreaks among choirs. And so, on the one hand, it makes sense to advise schools to stay away from singing. Wow. But on the other hand, it's unrealistic to think that schools would cancel band, choir, and school musicals now or at any other period of high transmission. I really feel for the people at the CDC, he said. They're damned if they do, and they're damned if they don't. Not only that, they don't know how to dress, and a lot of them can't do push-ups and have acne. Just so you know. Just so you know, that's the people at the CDC. Paul Imhoff, president of the School Superintendents Association. Everybody's got a club, huh? He told the CNN while schools have gone to great lengths to curb the spread of COVID-19, he doesn't know of any schools that have canceled activities such as football or band or choir. Such activities, he said, were important to students' mental health.
Yes.
Yes. Oh, come on. Since when is mental health more important than compliance with authority? In her statement to CNN, Walensky, that CDC lady we love so much, she said the CDC developed our school guidance knowing school administrators, teachers, and parents were looking to us at the CDC to get their children back in the enriching environment of the classroom. And it was a priority to get our children back to school safely, adding that vaccines are available for school-age children, which adds another layer of protection and enhances school guidance. Hang on. That's right. Children need to experience enriching in-person school bullying because on Zoom, it's just not the same. At a January 7th media briefing, Greta Massetti, chief of the CDC's field epidemiology. This is not easy for me. Greta Massetti, she's the chief of the CDC's field epidemiology and prevention branch and their sports car division. She said that the guidance was intended to really protect that critical in-person learning time. That's right. By the way, why are we even having this conversation when we have these amazing vaccines to stop the transmission of COVID? Rachel Maddow already explained that it stops the virus cold so it cannot spread. Have we thought about 5 boosters maybe? Maybe that would help. This is what I'm asking. Why are we even talking about this? Here we go. Schaffner, however, questioned why the CDC would advise schools to cancel extracurriculars that involve shouting when children shout on a regular basis. I could take you by the hand and say, let's walk through 3 grammar schools. What we see is kids shouting in the hallways. That's what kids do, said Schaffner, a liaison representative to the CDC's Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices. Oh, wow. So that's Schaffner. He's the coolest, hottest guy at the CDC. He really is. Isn't he? Come on. I mean, the people who are against him, can you imagine how frizzy their hair is? Probably greasy, too. Anyway, in its isolation and quarantine guidance, which was last updated January 9th, this is the CDC's updated. The agency tells people that if they have COVID-19, they should isolate themselves for 5 days
just 5.
following the onset of symptoms or a positive test. After that, they can end isolation if they're fever-free without the use of medication and other symptoms have improved. No kidding. Wow. The advice links to a CDC page that lists conditions that make people more likely to become severely ill with COVID-19. Many of the conditions are very common, such as being overweight or suffering from depression, certain heart conditions, or cancer. Wow. Wow. So the Computational Epidemiology Lab at Boston's Children's Hospital estimates that more than 80% of Americans have at least one of the conditions on the CDC's list, according to an analysis a group did for the CNN.
That's heartening.
Oh, wow. So did CNN did an analysis and determined the CDC can't sit at our lunch table. I think that's what happened. Schaffner questioned the practicality of avoiding 80% of the people around you. How do you know if people have heart conditions or diabetes? How are you supposed to figure that out? Can you recognize everyone who is pregnant or has sickle cell or is a former smoker, he said, naming some of the conditions on the CDC list of whom you're supposed to avoid. Dr. Schaffner then threw a football in a perfect spiral and made out with the hot art teacher, and the whole school started chanting his name. This guy's a legend. When considering the CDC school and isolation guidance, Glenn Novak thinks back to a foodborne illness outbreak that occurred in 2008, while he was the CDC's head of media relations. It was unclear exactly what had made people sick, but one of the possible culprits was tomatoes. So Novak says the agency scientists wanted to tell Americans to stop eating tomatoes.
There's more to it.
I know, but there are such betas at the CDC, aren't they? Now I want to invite them to promise a joke and dunk pig blood on their frickin' heads. That's what I want to do. Novak says he told the scientists that this was quite broad, telling people not to eat frickin' tomatoes, considering that tomatoes are a very common food. He says he asked his colleagues to be more specific. Was there a particular type or source of tomatoes that Americans should avoid? And you know what they said? I got an answer back. They said round red tomatoes.
Oh. Oh, wow.
I told them that's real. I told them that wasn't actionable. The warning about tomatoes was eventually scrapped altogether, and the red round vegetables ended up not even being the cause of the outbreak after all. It turned out to be jalapeno and serrano peppers.
Oh, I thought they were going to say that it was like gunshot victims, but they were counted as tomato deaths.
Spokespersons for the Superintendents Association and the National Association of Secondary School Principals said the CDC did not reach out to them to confer about the guidance on school sports and extracurricular activities. Really? Really? So Brawley, now a professor at Johns Hopkins University, said there's an alternative to the way the CDC issued their guidance. For example, if schools aren't ready to cancel football or choir, then the CDC could just explain that those are high-risk activities without directly advising against them. He said it would be important to explain the research that shows these are high-risk activities, something the CDC doesn't do on their website right now.
That's unbelievably simple. And by the way, I bet if they didn't want people to play those, if they did that instead, more people wouldn't engage in those things because you weren't telling them they can't do it.
That's right. I agree with you 100%. So again, I was right at the beginning of this, or I was right at the beginning of this year whenever I started pushing back on the COVID narrative and Fauci. We're being lied to time and time again. And there's people who have agendas that are hidden, that are not what they appear to be. And just like war is a racket, so is public policy. And so is COVID policy. It's a racket. And Dr. Fauci has been, if the Republicans take over Congress, which it looks like they will, I predict they'll throw him in jail. Because Dr. Fauci is a straight up criminal. And that's not, I'm not saying that lightly. I'm measuring my words. I'm choosing them carefully. Dr. Fauci is a corrupt, bought criminal. There you go.
Wouldn't they have to? I mean, he'd probably drag in most of them with him, wouldn't he? Like, he's been there for 40 years doing this kind of shit. Like,
well, he certainly lied to Congress several times, so that's what he should be in jail for at the very least. Let alone lying to the public as the head chief infectious guy about masks, about herd immunity. He lied to everybody about it. He admitted he lied. I don't have to go prove it. He already admitted he's a liar. So. Over to
do you like? Do you at least like Shaftman and the T-Brawl that we learned?
What's that?
Shaftman, the Schaffner.
I don't know who this
cool jock.
I don't know who that is.
Schaffner, earlier in the Dr. Schaffner.
Oh, Dr. Schaffner.
I was calling him the Shaftman.
Oh, now I get it. Okay. We added a second show, January 26th in Raleigh, and we're going to be in Philadelphia on February 20th. Go to jimmydorcomedy.com for a link for all our tickets. And while you're there, become a premium member. Get access to all our premium videos.